Hello, thank you for being with us. I'm Michelle Picard. I'm the supervisor of secondary English and reading in Loudoun County Public Schools. And I have here with me Heidi Walsh, who's an instructional facilitator in this office. And today we are really looking forward to presenting and sharing with you the power of short text in teaching secondary reading and writing. So before we begin, of course, we want to start with our objectives. We essentially have three objectives. The first is to demonstrate the power of short text, and it has three distinct purposes. One is to model the use of reading comprehension strategies so that we deepen understanding of all kinds of text. We also want to model that you can literally teach any standard of learning in the English Virginia Department SOLs, the skills and strategies, with the goal of transferring those skills and strategies to independent reading. And then third, we want to use short text to invite students to become independent readers and writers. When you have short text, it is short, and therefore you have the ability to expose kids to many more authors, topics, and genres. The second thing we really want to focus on is the cycle of having model text where the teacher has tight control over the lesson. And so she or he is thinking aloud and modeling processes, skills, strategies, analysis. But then we also want to show you guided practice. And one way we can look at guided practice is in a book club. So we're going to talk about that. And then lastly, we want to talk about the use of asynchronous lessons. Asynchronous meaning self-paced, on your own. When the global pandemic hit, of course, we had reduced instructional time. And so our division spent a lot of time creating these really powerful lessons, multi-day lessons that students could work through at their own pace. And so we want to use and demonstrate and share those with you today. So before we get started, we really need a common definition of short text. I think most people think about short text, they think of a short story or perhaps a news article. We want to also include poems, news articles, songs, and videos, any kind of text that will allow you to have a common conversation and lesson about skills and strategies. So first, we want to highlight the benefits of short text and its relationship to novels and literary nonfiction selections. Typically, secondary curriculum is very much embedded in authentic novels, which of course is very, very important. We want kids to read complex text with multiple plot lines. However, there is a caveat to that, which is that it takes a lot of time. So let's look at the shared benefits. When you're using short text or you're using a novel, you're building a community. Everyone is experiencing whatever that text is. If it's a powerful novel, you're experiencing the character development, the conflict, the theme. The same with a short text, you're experiencing a common time that you can harken back to throughout the year. So for example, if you're talking about characterization and how a character changed over time, you can say, remember when we read, and you have these touchstones. The other shared benefit is that every single one of those experiences, every single one of those lessons, the student has sort of mental Velcro. They can remember, oh, when we read The Crucible, this is what my teacher taught me, or this is how characters changed. Now, the benefits to short text are that it allows you to maximize instructional time. So if you're trying to teach theme, for example, in a novel, that's going to take you at least 3 weeks. But if you read a short story, that's going to take you a single period of time. So one of the benefits of short text is that you're maximizing the instructional time. You're getting multiple opportunities to learn a skill, whereas a novel or a literary nonfiction piece, you're really stretching out that instructional time. Another benefit to short text is you're building kids' confidence. It's practice laps, as Kelly Gallagher would say. Kids are getting to apply the skills and strategies, often with the support of their teacher or a small group. But because the text is short and there's a lot of scaffolding, They're building confidence. That again, the goal is to transfer to the longer, more complex text. We've already alluded to the fact that there's greater exposure to authors. So you're going to see Jason Reynolds, Jacqueline Woodson, Nicola June. You're going to have lots of different people in the short texts that may be a gateway to reading longer pieces. And then lastly, I also alluded to, there is a personalization of instruction. When you're looking at short text, you can have an intimacy. You can be with one student, you can be with a small group, or you can be with a whole group, but you can really target that instruction to the individual student. So with that grounding, I'm going to turn it over to Heidi Walsh to talk to you about workshop and how we build in cycles of tight control with a mini lesson, guided practice, and then individual personalized instruction, again, using short text.
Thank you, Dr. Picard. I am Heidi Walsh, and in Loudoun County Public Schools, we use the workshop model in our middle school classes to teach the content. And the reason why we do this is that it allows us to spend a small period of time teaching a concept and then working individually with students in small groups to reinforce that concept and to work with where the student is. So the first part is the mini lesson, and this is where the teacher models what the students will be learning that day. It is explicit, it's demonstrated, and it's short. It's usually anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes in length. Following the mini lessons, students begin to apply the lesson or lessons from that unit in their independent reading and writing. This is the majority of the workshop time, during which the teacher is meeting with small groups to reinforce or to reteach big concepts of that unit so that students can transfer those skills to their own reading. It's also a time to confer with individual students and to help them build confidence and grow as readers and writers. The third component is a partner share or a book club. Students are reading with a partner or a small group. This allows students to deepen comprehension with a peer or a group of peers. Finally, the last component is a whole class share, and this is time when teacher invites one or two groups of students to share their reflection and their thinking from the lesson. This goes hand in hand with the guided release of responsibility, thinking of the I do, we do, you do, so that students can then transfer what they're learning into their own work. Today, I'm going to model a short story lesson on character development. And this is focusing on perceptive readers acknowledging both likable and less likable traits of characters. The connection today, and I want you to be thinking about, have you ever had the experience of not wanting someone to criticize a family or a friend? I grew up with a brother who's slightly older than I am, and with family dynamics, he was always the one who knew everything and was always pushing me around and telling me how to do things. And I didn't always appreciate that. And so with my friends, I would often complain about him and share his less likable sides. But if anyone else were to point those out, I would be the first one to defend him. Right now, I want to give you a few moments to think about maybe a friend or a family member that you are protective of and don't necessarily want someone else criticizing. I'm going to pause and say that at this time, my students would have the opportunity to think, and I call this think time, where they have the time to process their own thinking before we start sharing out. They would then have the opportunity to share with a partner, and those partners are usually determined before a unit begins, and they work with that partner through the entire unit to build a relationship and the rapport to be able to share this type of thinking with each other. Once they have shared, I then share the teaching point. I make sure up front to state explicitly what they are going to be learning that day so that they know exactly what they're responsible for. So readers, today I want to teach you that it's easy to sympathize with protagonists or main characters and want to defend them. Perceptive readers, though, realize that complex characters, like real people, have parts of them that are less likable. This slide is inside of the presentation for you to see that the strands from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade are attached to this particular mini lesson, and that it can be used across all of the middle school grades. So you're going to be watching a Pixar short called Snack Attack. And as you are watching this video, I want you to note the positive and negative or the likable or less likable characteristics of both characters in the clip. You're going to want a piece of paper or a Post-it note in order to do this. The big part of this is to remember that you should collect evidence to support your thinking from the video about the characters. So take a moment to think about the character traits that you saw for both the little old woman and the young man. What were the likable traits and what were the less likable traits? Remember that you should have text evidence from the video to support your thinking.
So Heidi, I'm going to be your student here, and she is cranky. She is a cranky person, but she's also really assertive. Assertive in so much that here's my evidence. She ran into the snack machine. She was going to get what she wanted. And she was assertive with the young man, screaming at him and crumpling up her cookie. Definitely not assuming any positive intent. And then the guy, he seems very oblivious to everything that's happening. Nothing seems to bother him. So those are some of the things I'm thinking at this moment in time as your student.
So we are going to continue this thinking. Nope. Why won't we advance? Nope. So now we're going to be watching the remainder of the video. And as you watch the remainder of the video, I want you to be thinking about how the characters shift or change and why they are shifting and changing. Remember, you need to support your thinking with evidence from the video. So Michelle, what did you notice in the second part of that video?
Well, it was a real shift and a real surprise. I think when I first started watching it, I thought the woman was just sort of cranky and frustrated and eager to judge. But now that she realizes that she made a mistake, it seemed from her facial expressions that she had remorse and that she felt badly that she judged the young person so quickly. I'm also feeling a lot better about the young person. I think I was easy to judge him in the beginning, thinking, what is he doing and why isn't he paying attention to her? But now I'm realizing he was really just generous of spirit and willing to share his snack. So big shifts.
So as you can see, characters have both likable and less likable sides. So as you go into your independent reading today, you want to be looking at a character within your story and looking at their both likable and less likable sides and finding evidence to support your thinking. So these are some examples from students that I have had in the past, from the books that they have read, from Blackwater, from Spinning, and from Salt of the Sea, where a character was pulled out and they were looking at both the likable and less likable or positive and negative traits of a character and then finding evidence to support their thinking. So today, as you're working in your own book, you are going to be creating a notebook page inside of your notebook on the likable and less likable traits of a character. So during this time when students go off to do their independent work, I would be working with small groups or conducting individual conferencing. Conferring is one of the biggest parts of workshop. It is where you are working individually with students to sort of do formative assessments where you are thinking and looking at where students are right now with their thinking and the strategies that you have taught and how you are going to build them up and push them forward. And in a lot of cases, sometimes you need to go back and reteach some concepts that the student isn't getting or hasn't solidified yet, so that you are working with the student where they are at that given moment. So you have an umbrella lesson, but then you are working with students where they are to get them to move forward. It's also about lifting students up in both their reading and their writing skills and their interests to create readers and writers, to build them up, to help them develop confidence in their skills, to move forward in individual work and transfer the work that you've done in the big lessons.
So I love that lesson. I love that we're using video, so it takes out the challenge of getting words off the page, so that kids can notice evidence about characters and how they change and what their thinking is. But we of course want to shift that to their to text and to their individual reading, as Heidi just said. Another way to provide guided practice is in a book club setting. So using the very same lesson that Heidi taught, you could put kids into book clubs and provide short stories. There are many, many wonderful anthologies that we're going to show you in just a minute. And you can have the kids read the anthology, I'm sorry, not the anthology, the selection from the anthology, with the goal of looking at a major and minor character, looking at their desirable characteristics and their less desirable characteristics, again, with evidence. And again, you could also use the notebook page that she described. So in the next slide, you might provide not only the text, so you're all going to read the short story together, but you might provide a chart so that as the kids are talking about the text, they can highlight, annotate, discuss. They can be filling out a joint chart. You can also then jigsaw that. So instead of having one story, you can have 6 to 8 where they're talking about it. From that group experience, you might then, in the small group, divide up other characters. So you might look at a minor character and say, what were the likable and what were the less likable characteristics? The critical point here is how it deepens understanding. And as every good English teacher says, what's your evidence? What's your evidence? What's your evidence? So the guided practice can be during the tight mini lesson, it can be during a small group scaffolded situation, or it can be in the conferring situation as Heidi described. Oh, so you're reading everything. So tell me about the character. What's likable? What's less likable? How does that lead you to understand this piece? In the next slide, we've just highlighted, Heidi, you can move forward one. We've highlighted anthologies that we have used in our district. We do have a reader writer workshop methodology, K-8, and we're really moving that into high school as well. These are some of the anthologies that we've used for mentor texts in the middle school. And again, that can be with the whole class, like she did with Snack Attack, or it could be in a small group. This is where a lot of our book club, starting with short stories, came from. And it can also be individual. Maybe you have a reluctant reader and you want to hook them by reading Flying Lessons and other stories. I love Meg Medina's story in there. So you want, these are some resources at your disposal. The next slide is simply the titles. We wanted to give you the visual. We also wanted to give you the pictures. I also want to mention that our entire summer school program is based on an anthology every year. This year, if you go back one slide real quickly, we built our summer middle school program based on Hero Next Door. We had a committee read and select, I think, 6 different short stories. So kids are getting a short story every 2 days. They're learning a lesson. And then most importantly, they're applying that to their independent learning. So this brings us to the third and final section of our presentation, which is independent lessons in a personalized environment. I absolutely think a silver lining to the global pandemic has been that we have tried to create a lot of really powerful content that kids can go through at their own pace. And we want to share those with you today. So the next slide, just quickly as a background, Heidi, can you move one more? There we go. We've been talking about a workshop format. You saw Heidi give a mini lesson. She connected to the story, to the teaching point. She taught a very explicit teaching point. She guided them. They applied the work, they shared, and then they extended into their own reading. Another framework very similar is called Universal Design Framework. Our educational technology office in last March came up with this universal design, and we basically started to create asynchronous lessons in all content areas with this design so that students would have a similar design in every single class. The reason I spend time sharing this with you is we're going to share 12 multi-day lessons that follow this design. So when we were forced out of school last March, the first thing the English department did with this instruction and guidance around HyperDocs and universal design is we decided to build 12 multi-day lessons on the signposts that were created by Kylene Beers and Robert Probst. These are two of their very, well, really iconic books for adolescent literacy development. They came up with 12 strategies that deepen comprehension. So we want to give credit there, and there's a link based in there about what those signposts are. Signposts, like a roadway sign, gives you direction. So on the next slide, you'll see one of the signposts is called Again and Again. And the strategy is essentially to notice repetition. Again, Kylene Beers and Bob Probst came up with this, and they have a literal anchor chart. They want you to stop, notice, and note. And in this case, they want you to stop, notice, and note when there's something that's repeated, a word, a phrase, an object, a situation. And then to ask yourself as the reader metacognitively, why does this keep happening again and again? And then they give you a key. Well, if you ask yourself that, you're going to have insight into theme, conflict, or foreshadowing, any one of those. And you can see this is very much aligned with the standards of learning. Might be a little bit different language, so it's important that we connect the language of the signposts to the standards of learning. So that's one example. The next slide shows you here are the 12 different signposts, 12 different multi-day lessons. Half of them are in fiction and half of them are in nonfiction. And I'm essentially, I'm not going to go into the hyperdoc. We've hyperlinked everything for you, but I'm going to showcase one of the strategies, and that's going to be a fiction strategy. It's the Again and Again lesson. So the first slide in this hyperdoc series, one more, Heidi, is to engage. And the engage section can involve many different things. This particular one just talks about what does it mean again and again. And we've just discussed this, that when something is repeating, the author is telling you to pay attention. And I believe in this, they actually tell the story of Charlie Brown and Lucy. Lucy is always putting that football out there for Charlie Brown to kick, but what happens every single time? She pulls away that football. Why is that happening? What is that telling you about the characters and the theme to that story? Next, we want to explore in this hyperdoc that we're going to give credit to Lisa Tartaglia on because she created it for us. She has the anchor chart. We really believe powerfully that you want to put up the teaching point, the anchor chart, have it accessible for students. And then there are these wonderful videos that are public domain. This one is the Again and Again moments, where it literally is a short video based on Kylene Beers and Bob Probst's work that tells you how you can deepen your comprehension, understanding the strategy. Next is the explain or the teaching, and you can see we've already done some of the teaching. This is what it looks like on the hyperdoc, and then as Heidi has advanced the slide, it provides a super short video with no text whatsoever. Again, moving sort of from really accessible short text video to independent level reading text. And this is a movie called Octopi, and the teacher not only asks the questions, but in the hyperdoc, she gives the answers. So she asks the questions. Why does this keep happening? Why does this keep showing up? What does it tell us about conflict and theme? And in the hyperdoc, she actually gives the answers. So the benefit here is kids can watch things multiple times and they can look at the answers. So here's the model. Then we asked the kids to apply what they learned. Again, we really relied heavily initially on video text, and we also believe strongly in choice. So here's a list of 4 films. On the Google form, the student was asked to watch at least one of the films and then answer the questions. So it's been modeled, it's been explained, and now they have one opportunity to practice. This is where the teacher comes in. The answers get submitted to the teacher, and the teacher can give individual feedback to each and every student, or they can highlight them in their synchronous time. And then finally, there's a reflect. There's always a moment where the students are asked to reflect. In this case, in a Google form, it could have been in an electronic notebook, it could have been a Flipgrid, but the students asked to reflect how learning about that strategy improves their reading or writing. And then the last piece and the most important piece is, can you do it on your own? So they're asked to think about how they can do it on their own. The next piece is just an example of how each of the strategies can be applied to any longer piece of text. You can highlight it with short text as we have in that HyperDoc. But for example, I found this on the internet from Number the Stars, and the class just used each one of the strategies to have a deeper understanding of that novel. So I know that was a quick run through. The next slide shows you that we have the same kinds of information, the same multi-step lessons that are asynchronous for nonfiction. What we really want to highlight here is the ability to go through that modeling, whether that's asynchronous or synchronous, guided practice with timely feedback, and then ultimately the independent application. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heidi to talk about some of the resources we embedded.
So as Michelle just shared, the 12 strategies are created in HyperDocs. So those links that are on those previous slides will take you directly to HyperDocs, which go through the process that Michelle just explained. The next two slides are the lesson plans where if you wanted to teach it face-to-face or in synchronous time, it is designed as a lesson plan where you can follow the VDOE format and see what SOLs are applied and then how to implement that within your own classroom. These are not a single day lesson. These are multi-day lessons. There's no way you could possibly cover all of this in one class if you were teaching it in a synchronous time. We also have included some extension videos so that you can push your students who need additional work or additional practice with other videos. And this is the same thing for the nonfiction text. In this case, we've used actual articles from Newsela, and we have linked those articles here for you to use.
So bringing us back to the beginning, we really wanted to make the case for using more short text in secondary classrooms. Obviously, we love literacy and we love the longer multi-plot line fiction, and we want complex text in the hands of kids. But we also recognize that teaching can be more efficient if we're doing it with short, common text. We've modeled the comprehension strategies from Kylene Beers and Bob Probst, but we've also tied that to literally any English standard of learning can be taught in this way. And then a key component is that we want kids to develop their own reading and writing lives. We want the transfer of skills. We've demonstrated various uses of guided practice, but particularly we're shouting out to book clubs. Book clubs can start with short stories or poems or songs or videos, but then they can move, of course, to novels. And then finally, in this interesting new age, we've shared a tool that's now in our tool belt much more, which is the use of asynchronous lessons, having that to really support our kids. Before we leave you, we also want to thank the teachers that have so graciously shared this work. This work took a lot of time to develop, and we're just really proud of the work, but we do want to share it because we're stronger. One thing we've learned in COVID is that we are so much stronger when we come together than we are apart. So we've done a lot of collaborative planning, and this is the result of some of that collaborative planning. These are some of the people that contributed to the series that we shared with you today. And then lastly, we're going to share with you our contact information. The VDOE is going to post all of these wonderful resources that are available to you. And we're available to you as well to support you in your teaching journey. Thanks for being with us.